Now, I've talked a lot about modded watches in the past, and I ruffled a lot of feathers when I made this video. Now, what people fail to recognize is I don't mind modded watches. I think modded watches have a place in the watch world and watch community, such as homage watches, right? They have a place in the community. What I didn't like, and what I said in that video, was I don't like watches that portray themselves to be something else. Specifically, people were putting Grand Seiko dials on modded watches, and to me, that's just a replica, that's just a fake. Today, Zjani watches, which is what I have here, does what I love. They mod watches for kind of historical reasons, at least the one that I have here today, and that is their 1960s milsub on a nylon strap. As always, first I'm going to do the detail first, all the specs, then I'll give you my opinion at the very end. This just appeals to more people. They say that I talk too much, but links down below for the watch, specifically link down below, and Chase Straps, my own personal watch strap company. Also, check out watches I've reviewed, because sometimes I get a watch in, I review it, I sell it at a heavily discounted price on my eBay store, so check down below. Now, let's hop into it. This watch is a classic vintage sub design with a case diameter of 39.5 millimeters, a case thickness of 13 millimeters if you have the sapphire crystal like this one does. But if you really want the vintage look, the bubble acrylic comes in at 16 millimeters. The lug to lug is just over 47 millimeters, so the footprint is quite small. The lug width is 20 millimeters, so you're going to see some chase straps on this watch towards the end of the video. The case material is 316L stainless steel, which is the industrial standard. High polished finishing along the side with brushing along the top of the watch. Inside this 200-meter diver is the Seiko NH35 movement, which is a workhorse beating at 21,600 vibrations an hour or 6 ticks a second. The power reserve on this watch varies from anywhere from 38 to 40, depending on what website you look. The dial is black with sword hands, matte in texture with cream lume on the indices. The bezel is a 120-click unidirectional bezel with a steel bezel insert, which will scratch and wear over time, giving it that very unique wear that makes it only your watch. Zjani automatic printed just below the 12, 600 foot, 200 meter, and Submariner printed just above the 6. The nylon strap is green with a center stripe that gives a well overall presentation to the vintage aesthetic and vibe. Like all nylon straps, this adds just a little bit of bulk to the watch, which some like and others don't. A remedy to this would be a chase strap, like this vintage suede strap in gray or in brown. Drilled lugs are great to see, again, sticking with that vintage look. A crown, which is sterile, which means it has no signage, and a solid, sterile caseback. Now, my thoughts. Now, if you like the vintage aesthetic of this watch and you don't want to deal with all the vintage hassle of having a vintage watch, then this is probably up your alley. A lot of people tend to buy vintage watches not knowing the hassle that comes along with owning a vintage watch. Something like this gives you the vintage vibe, the vintage aesthetic, but gives all the new parts and wear that you'd see coming from a brand new watch. So all the seals, the gaskets are good. 200 meters of water resistance, you have no problem going in the water. Whereas if you go into the water with a vintage dive watch, it's going to ruin the entire watch. The gaskets, even replaced, I still would never do it. So all the vintage look with all the new feel of a watch. Plus, you get to sort of make it your own. You get to put the wear on the watch that you want. You get to put the nicks, the dings, the scratches. The bezel will tend to wear and fade. Now, some people like picking up that vintage watch because they like the fact that it has history behind it. This allows you to create your own history in the watch. Now, unlike a lot of other Seiko modded watches, which they also do Seiko modded watches, again, check the link down below, but they decided to put their own name on the watch itself. Again, the issue I had with the Grand Seiko modded Seiko watches is because it's trying to make it out to be something it's not, which is a Grand Seiko. They don't do that at all. Yes, it does say Submariner just above the 6, but it also has their own name just below the 12. Now the bezel feels great and it has great positive feedback, but I'm not particular to the cheap sound, I guess, that comes with the clicking of the bezel. Now some people are going to argue with me on this. I've handled a lot of dive watches from really high end to really, really low end, and there's just something about the bezel feel and the bezel sound that is a turn on or turn off to me. It's not a super turn off, but it just kind of sounds tinny and high pitched, and it just kind of makes me not want to use it. Now it could be an absolute solid bezel, and it is. Everything lines up perfectly, it functions absolutely the way it should, and the clicks feel great, but the sound, it just isn't for me, if that makes any sense. Now once you get this thing in the water, you get it wet, you get some sand in it, the tinniness may go away, but I just don't know. One of the things that I understand that a lot of modding companies do is use the NH35. The NH35 is a workhorse movement. It has a decent power reserve, around 40 hours. It has a vibration rate of 21,600 vibrations an hour, or it's 3 hertz, which means, again, that second hand ticks at 6 ticks a second, and it is automatic. And there are many parts and pieces, and almost anybody can fix or replace an NH35. That's great. But if you notice on the dial, this thing doesn't have a date. The NH35 has a date. So when you pull it out in the first position, it's going to have a ghost date position, which means the first position is a date wheel that is behind the dial that's not displayed. Then you pull it out again, and then you can go into the time function. This is just a slight moan, a slight con for me. It's not a deal breaker, but there are other movements out there that are time only, that are not ghost date, and they could have used, but I understand why they use an NH35. It's in a lot of watches. The NH35 is in watches from $80 to $500, so no way is it an absolute cheap movement, but it is a movement that is used in a lot of these watches. I just wish they would have used a different movement, but the movement is good on its own, but understand it does have a ghost date position. Now they do also have this watch with a date. So it makes sense why when it comes to cost cutting and making it more affordable, they would just use the same movement throughout, whether or not it has a date or no date. Just something to keep in mind for the no date people, it's gonna have a ghost date. Now on my watch, this is a sapphire crystal. I wish I would have gotten the Hesselite or the acrylic crystal, only because it fits more with the vintage vibe, but the sapphire is gonna make it so it doesn't scratch. It's gonna look newer over time, but the acrylic crystal just gives it more, that seals in that vintage vibe. So if you're gonna go for this watch, go for the acrylic crystal, the dome crystal. It is gonna sit slightly higher on the wrist, but I think you're gonna get a lot more of that aesthetic appeal of that vintage look. The lume is fine on the watch. It shines like it should. It's not great, it's not bad. It's sort of somewhere in the middle. I do love the cream lume indices. I think, again, it gives it more of that vintage look. I love the matte dial. I just love the way this thing looks. Overall, the proportions are great. The lug to lug at just over 47 fits my 7¼ inch wrist just fine. No issues there. Understand, again, I already mentioned it, that with any type of Zulu strap or any type of NATO strap, there is going to be a little bit of bulk that comes along with it. So it's not going to sit at 13 millimeters or even 16 millimeters for the domed acrylic crystal. It's going to sit more like 18 millimeters. So if you don't want that, go with an alternative strap. They also have this on a stainless steel strap, or just pick up a chase strap. Link down below. Anyway, what do you guys think about this watch? I'm still right in the middle of kind of adjusting the YouTube studio, so you're gonna see some slight adjustments here and there. I picked up this brand new desk. I absolutely just love it. I love the vintage look of old things. Now, if you've stayed around for this long, please hit the subscribe button. It's free. It really does help the channel. Hit the notification bell. People apparently don't get notified when I drop videos like this. Hit the like button. It really does help. I appreciate everybody who stopped by, and I'll see you guys in the next one.